Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I saw an interesting study today that I thought I would share with you guys, and more importantly, the extrapolations that we can make from this study are interesting. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. What we have is a study being done on men's prostate cancer drugs. All right, what this does is that it is a substance that blocks androgens in the body. Androgens, meaning testosterone, DHT, all these things, all your male sex hormones, which are also all these anabolic hormones. Now, the reason they wanted to do a study on training response and protein is because when men are put on these drugs, they usually lose muscle mass, and that's not desirable. Actual loss of muscle mass is bad for your health usually. Doctors realize this. It can cause all sorts of other health problems and everything else to lose muscle mass. Maintaining muscle mass, particularly as we age, is extremely beneficial to our health. And they know that this substance being used to save someone's life, I mean, prostate cancer can kill you. This substance being used to save men's lives is also costing them muscle mass and harming their health. So what they wanted to see was what happens when they do different things like add protein in, add training in, add both training and protein in. And when they compared it to a control group, these men whose androgen levels were not down. I mean, we're talking about under female level androgen levels. They're pushed all the way down. All right? What they found was that the muscle protein synthesis that they saw as a result of training and then feeding protein with it was the same muscle protein synthesis response that men who had normal healthy testosterone levels got. All right? And that's significant because that means that training response, particularly your diet in, the training response and protein in response happens comparable to, again, sufficient protein feeding, but the workload and training stimulus that you put in is what determines how much muscle growth that you gain, not your androgen levels. As a result of training, it doesn't seem to impact it, and that's what I've said before. Androgen levels determine how much muscle you grow and carry all day long. It determines how much muscle you're just going to walk around with. All right? It doesn't determine what happens as a result of training. It doesn't determine what happens as a result of training. And that's an interesting thing because this works a couple different directions to dispel certain myths. Number one, that men who have low testosterone levels or who are suffering from it can't gain muscle mass from training. The reality is they gain muscle mass directly from the training just as fast as other people. This study kind of confirms that. The response and the muscles to the training was identical. Now, they also carry less muscle mass anyways because they just have less androgens causing their muscles to grow 24/7. You need to remember, muscles shrink and grow every day. All right, they're active metabolic tissue. Active metabolic tissue. Training only causes a short window of growth. Muscles only grow for about 1 to 2 days. It's 28 to 48 hours after you train. That's your entire growth window. After that, a muscle doesn't grow again. So a guy who comes in and has an arm day or a chest day or whatever it is, if he's doing a body part split, he's growing at most 2 days of the week in those muscles. That's it. The other 5 days of the week, those muscles are not growing at all from his training. But his androgen levels can cause muscles to grow or shrink on those the rest of the time. They can cause them to grow or shrink every single day. Someone with higher androgen levels is going to tend to gain muscle just sitting around more. All right? Someone with lower testosterone levels, your testosterone levels get lowered, you're going to start losing muscle. And it's going to happen regularly until you get to kind of a baseline that your hormone levels will determine. Now, training will cause everyone to gain muscle. As a response to your training. And the interesting thing there is, yeah, guys who have low testosterone levels are just going to hold less muscle mass in general, but they'll gain muscle at the same rate that other people do as predicted by their training workloads and their training response, their training experience. And that's the interesting point. Because this also shows that low testosterone doesn't mean you can't gain muscle. Guys who are suffering from low testosterone, haven't gotten TRT yet or anything else, they can still gain muscle mass. They gain muscle mass just fine. They're just not going to have as much muscle total in general because they aren't going to be growing other than through their training response. The other big thing it comes down to is back to this whole idea that I try to tell people They're like, well, guys who use lots of gear still have to train hard. Actually, no, they really don't. The training will help a little bit. The training will help a little bit, but it's not going to help a lot. You're going to get the training response from your training. But it's not like they're going to gain double the muscle from training to someone else. Meaning, if someone goes on a bunch of gear, most of the muscle they're going to gain is going to be from the drugs. It's going to be 7 days a week. Even a muscle they only train once a week is going to just be growing 7 days a week. They're going to have elevated muscle protein synthesis all the time. And we have studies confirming that. I've linked multiple times and discussed many times. We had studies where young, healthy men in the United States under laboratory-controlled conditions were given up to 600 milligrams of testosterone a week for 20 weeks straight. Every one of them gained over twice as much muscle while sitting on their asses, and these were guys who had previously been lifting weights. Right? These are all men who had at least 1 year of continuous training experience. That's how the study's been done several times now. They have them stop lifting completely. Stop lifting completely. They put them on 600 milligrams of testosterone, which is about 4 times the amount your body produces. Right? So their testosterone levels are about 4 times an 18-year-old male's. They gain muscle over twice as fast as people in the control group who were lifting weights. They were gaining muscle like 3 times the rate they did while stopping training, completely stopping. So this point comes back to, someone says, well, so-and-so, gained whatever over this course of this year who were on drugs, they gained 10 pounds of muscle. Well, if they've been training more than about 3 years, the normal muscle gain from training might only be about a pound of muscle in that year, right? About 1 pound. But they gained 10 pounds of muscle while training and doing the drugs? No, they only gained a pound of muscle from their training. The other 9 pounds came from the drugs they were on. And that 9 pounds is totally independent of your training, meaning your androgen levels give you a certain amount of extra muscle. It will cause muscle to just grow at a certain rate on its own. Your lifting is additive to that. And this study confirms it because we've kind of looked at that and seen that the other direction. As far as androgens just causing growth on their own, no training required. You can stop training it if the androgen levels go high enough, you grow. And we also know that men whose testosterone levels get lowered start losing muscle. But training has an additive effect to that, and this confirms it. These men on lower testosterone didn't gain less muscle mass. They didn't have less muscle protein synthesis from training than the guys who had normal testosterone. It's just that the rest of the time they weren't growing as fast when it was just their body helping them grow muscle from the hormone levels alone. And there's a reason men carry more muscle than women even when we don't exercise. It's normal. So again, our hormone levels affect it to a very large extent. Well, these men had the same training response. So I would suggest to you that even when high levels of testosterone come into play, it's the exact same thing. They gain the same amount of muscle from training that a natural person does. No more, no less. The rest of the muscle they're gaining is all the drugs. And yes, hypothetically, they could just quit lifting completely. And what I'm suggesting is because men only gain about 20 pounds of muscle over their career training. They can gain more sometimes. At 20 to 25 pounds is a good amount of muscle to gain for your lifetime. You've been training drug-free for 5 to 10 years really hard. About 25 pounds of muscle is going to be your gains. So what I'm suggesting is that if someone was on IFBB type doses of drugs who normally weighs 300 pounds, they would only have about 25 pounds less muscle had they never touched a weight. Had they just used stuff and gone on all these big blasts and didn't bother to go to the gym, they would probably be 275 instead of 300. Just throwing that out there. And that's an interesting way to look at it. Because that does show, this backs what other studies have shown, that training induces a given amount of muscle growth, whether your hormone levels are low or high or even way high outside the normal range. And in this case, they were low outside the normal range. They still got the exact same training response. No difference in training response, even though they were below the normal range, way under. Didn't affect it enough for the training to not cause the same amount of stimulus. Response was the same to training. Muscle growth is the same from the training. It's the same for the guys who are using tons of stuff. In other words, they're only gaining a very, very tiny amount of muscle from the training, and training harder isn't necessarily just going to stimulate more. You can only stimulate so much growth at once. So again, people look at these guys and think that maybe they know something about training, maybe they're training hard. You know what? It probably doesn't matter that much. That's why when people ask me things like, well, if this pro bodybuilder does this, it must work. I mean, look at their size. Or how should people train when they do what these guys do? And I would tell you it probably doesn't matter that much. How someone trains who's on a ton of gear, how they choose to train probably isn't going to significantly affect their results. Because at that point, training plays such a tiny role in their muscle growth that it's just not going to matter that much. They can probably just do whatever they want. They're probably not going to see much difference. And that's just the reality. Because training response induces the amount of muscle growth that it's going to reduce, seems to do it irrespective. And this was a study looking at the other end of the range. We got the same results. So it's interesting. And it also shows there is hope for guys who maybe have low testosterone. They have low testosterone. They can't get TRT for whatever reason. Maybe they have a family history to where they shouldn't get TRT. I know a guy like that, in fact. He probably needs it, but his family history, he's scared to do it because he is concerned it could harm him due to some issues in his family, such as prostate cancer being extremely prevalent. He's scared of getting prostate cancer. And that's a valid concern at that point. So, there's still hope for people like that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.